Imagine waking up to what seems like the perfect life, a devoted billionaire husband after 20 years of marriage, a thriving luxury interior design business you built from the ground up, and finally, the miracle pregnancy you fought for through years of heartbreaking fertility struggles and miscarriages. Picture Sarah Wellington, glowing at 42, clutching ultrasound photos in a pristine Beverly Hills doctor's office. Her heart full of joy as the doctor confirms everything is on track at 24 weeks. But in one frozen moment, a buzzing phone, her husband's forgotten device, shatters it all. A text from C. Can't wait for our weekend in Aspen. Darling, I love you more than his boring pregnant wife ever could. Who is C and how deep does this betrayal run? From that ice-cold revelation, dive into a whirlwind of deception, where Sarah uncovers not just an affair, but a calculated plot, years in the making, hidden assets, stolen business secrets, threatening messages, and a web of lies that turns her dream home into a prison and her closest allies into potential enemies. Watch as this once naive wife transforms into a fierce warrior mother, battling for her unborn child amid pregnancy complications, legal wars, and shocking twists that reveal her husband might be far more dangerous than a mere cheater. Is David a tech mogul or a master manipulator with a deadly past? And what about Charlotte, the best friend who's been pulling strings all along? Every chapter builds unbearable tension, from emotional gut punches in luxurious Malibu estates to heart-racing confrontations that expose murders, fraud, and international crimes. Will Sarah survive the violent betrayal, protect her baby Lily, and rise from the ashes, or will the hidden threats in her new beginning drag her back into the nightmare? This story of heartbreak, revenge, and empowerment will keep you on the edge of your seat, questioning trust, love, and justice at every turn, perfect for fans of thrillers like Gone Girl or Big Little Lies, but with a raw, real-world edge on marital betrayal and female resilience. If your pulse is racing already and you're dying to know how it ends, smash that like button to show your support for epic drama. Drop a comment below with your wildest prediction: who's the ultimate villain? David or Charlotte? Share this video with your friends who love juicy betrayal tales so we can discuss in the comments. And hit subscribe with notifications on for more mind-blowing story breakdowns, reviews, and exclusive deep dives into viral thrillers. Don't miss out. Your next obsession starts now. Let's unravel Billionaire cheats after 20 years marriage together. Stay tuned till the end for the shocking finale twists. Sarah Wellington clutched the ultrasound photos against her chest as she sat in Dr. Martinez's pristine Beverly Hills office. At 42, after years of fertility struggles that had tested her marriage to its very core, she was finally experiencing the miracle she had prayed for every single night. The pregnancy glow that everyone talked about seemed to radiate from her skin, and for the first time in months, genuine happiness filled her heart. Everything looks perfect, Mrs. Wellington. Dr. Martinez smiled warmly, adjusting his white coat. Your baby is developing beautifully, and at 24 weeks, we're right on track for a healthy delivery. Sarah's designer maternity dress, a soft cream silk that had cost more than most people's monthly rent, couldn't hide her excitement. She had chosen it specifically for this appointment, wanting to look perfect when she received what she hoped would be good news about her miracle pregnancy. Her phone buzzed on the examination table. David's phone. He had left it behind in his rush to get to what he called an emergency board meeting. Sarah glanced at the screen and saw a text message notification. Without thinking, she picked it up to check if it was something urgent that might need her attention. The message that appeared made her blood turn to ice. Can't wait for our weekend in Aspen. Darling, the suite at the Little Nell is booked under our usual alias. I love you more than his boring pregnant wife ever could. Missing you already. XOXO. C. The ultrasound photos slipped from Sarah's trembling fingers, falling to the sterile white floor in what felt like slow motion. 20 years of marriage. 20 years of building a life together. 20 years of believing she knew the man she had fallen in love with in college. Mrs. Wellington, is everything all right? Dr. Martinez's voice seemed to come from very far away. Sarah stared at the phone screen, reading the message again and again, hoping somehow the words would change, but they remained the same. Each letter a dagger to her heart. Her husband, tech billionaire David Wellington, was having an affair, and whoever this C was, she clearly knew about the pregnancy. "I need to go," Sarah whispered, gathering the ultrasound photos from the floor with shaking hands. "I'm sorry. I have to leave right now." The drive back to their $50 million Malibu estate felt like a journey through a nightmare. Every traffic light, every curve of the Pacific Coast Highway seemed to mock her. She had decorated their mansion with such love and care over the past 2 decades, choosing every piece of furniture, every painting, every detail to create the perfect sanctuary for their family. Now, as she pulled through the electronic gates and saw the sprawling Mediterranean-style villa overlooking the ocean, it felt like a beautiful prison. David's black Tesla was in the driveway. So much for his emergency board meeting. Sarah found him in his home office, the room with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a breathtaking view of the Pacific Ocean. He was on the phone, speaking in low tones, his back turned to the door. His thick, dark hair was perfectly styled, his expensive Italian suit tailored to perfection. He looked every inch the successful billionaire that he was. "I have to go," he said into the phone, his voice tender in a way that Sarah realized she hadn't heard directed at her in years. "Yes, I love you too." "David," Sarah's voice cut through the silence like a blade. He spun around, his face cycling through surprise, guilt, and then settling into a cold mass that she had never seen before. This wasn't the man who had proposed to her on the beach just outside these very windows. This wasn't the man who had held her while she cried through 3 miscarriages. This was a stranger wearing her husband's face. "Sarah, how did the appointment go?" His voice was steady, controlled, as if he hadn't just been caught in the most devastating betrayal imaginable. She held up his phone, her hands still trembling. "How could you do this? I'm carrying your child, 20 years of marriage." "David, 20 years I thought billionaire husbands were supposed to protect their pregnant wives, not betray them with some home-wrecking mistress." For a moment, something flickered across his face. Regret, shame, but it was gone so quickly she might have imagined it. "Sarah, let's be reasonable about this," he said, moving to pour himself a glass of the expensive scotch he kept on his desk. He didn't offer her any, didn't seem to remember that she was pregnant and couldn't drink even if she wanted to. "You've been so focused on getting pregnant, on your hormones and your doctor's appointments. When was the last time we had a real conversation? When was the last time you asked about my day, my work, my feelings?" "Your feelings." Sarah's voice rose to a pitch she barely recognized. "I've spent the last 5 years going through fertility treatments that made me sick, that changed my body, that consumed our lives. And you want to talk about your feelings? I did all of that for us, for our family." "No," David said coldly, taking a sip of his scotch. "You did it for you, because you wanted a baby. You never once asked if I was ready, if I wanted to go through all of that. You just decided, and I went along with it because I thought it would make you happy. But nothing makes you happy. Sarah, nothing is ever enough." The words hit her like physical blows. "That's not true. I love you. I've always loved you." "Love," David laughed, but there was no humor in it. "When was the last time you touched me, really touched me, not just because your ovulation app told you it was the right time, but because you wanted me?" Sarah opened her mouth to protest, but the words died in her throat. The fertility treatments had consumed their marriage, turning intimacy into a clinical procedure, romance into a scheduled obligation. But that didn't excuse this. That didn't excuse what he had done. "Who is she?" Sarah asked quietly. David set down his glass and looked at her with those blue eyes that had once made her feel like the most beautiful woman in the world. Now they were cold as winter ocean. "It doesn't matter who she is. What matters is that I've been planning this for months. Sarah, I've already consulted with the best divorce attorneys in the state, ones who specialize in millionaire husband cheating asset division cases. You need to understand that this marriage has been over for a long time. I'm just finally being honest about it. The casual way he said it, as if he were discussing a business merger rather than the destruction of their life together, made Sarah feel sick. She stumbled backward, grabbing the doorframe for support. "The baby," she whispered. "What about our baby?" "That's something we'll need to discuss with the lawyers," David said, turning back to his computer as if she were already dismissed. "I suggest you get a good attorney. Sarah, you're going to need one." Sarah ran from the office, her designer heels clicking on the marble floors that she had chosen with such care. She made it to their bedroom before the sobs overtook her. Their bedroom, with its California king bed draped in Italian linens, where they had made love for the first time as husband and wife, where they had dreamed together about the family they would build. She collapsed on the bed, clutching her growing belly, and cried until she had no tears left. It was only later, when she was going through David's desk looking for any clue about who C might be, that she found the business cards tucked away in his drawer, cards for divorce attorneys, private investigators, and asset protection specialists. The dates on the consultation notes went back months, some of them stamped from before she had even gotten pregnant. He had been planning this betrayal since before their miracle baby was conceived. But the worst discovery was yet to come. As Sarah sat in his leather chair, surrounded by the wreckage of her illusions, she noticed a photograph tucked behind his computer monitor. It was a picture from the opening of Wellington and Hayes Luxury Interiors, their interior design firm. In the photo, Sarah stood beaming next to her best friend and business partner, Charlotte Hayes, the woman who had been her maid of honor, who had held her hand through every fertility appointment, who had helped her design the nursery for their baby. Charlotte Hayes. See, Sarah stared at the photograph, and Charlotte's face seemed to transform before her eyes from that of a loyal friend into something predatory and calculating. How long had this been going on? How many times had Charlotte sat in this very house, drinking wine with Sarah, listening to her hopes and fears about her marriage, all while sleeping with her husband? The realization hit her like a physical blow. Every shared confidence, every moment of vulnerability, every tear she had shed on Charlotte's shoulder about the fertility struggles. It had all been a lie. Charlotte had been laughing at her, pitying her, stealing her husband while pretending to care. Sarah's phone rang, snapping her out of her spiral of devastation. Charlotte's name appeared on the screen, as if she somehow knew that her secret had been discovered. "Sarah, honey, how did the doctor's appointment go?" Charlotte's voice was warm and concerned, exactly as it had always been. "I've been thinking about you all day. Is everything okay with the baby?" Sarah closed her eyes, listening to the voice of the woman who had destroyed her life while pretending to care about her and her unborn child. When she opened them again, something had changed inside her. The devastated, weeping woman was gone, replaced by someone harder, someone who was beginning to understand the scope of the betrayal she faced. "Everything is perfect, Charlotte," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. "Absolutely perfect. The baby is healthy, and I couldn't be happier." As she hung up the phone, Sarah made a decision. If David and Charlotte thought they could destroy her so easily, they were about to learn just how wrong they were. She was Sarah Wellington, and she hadn't built a multi-million-dollar design business by being weak. She had survived miscarriages, fertility treatments, and years of trying to be the perfect wife. She would survive this too. But first, she needed to know exactly how deep this betrayal went. Sarah opened David's laptop, her fingers flying over the keyboard as she began to dig into the digital life of the man she thought she knew. What she found in his search history and email accounts would change everything she thought she understood about her marriage, her best friend, and the man who had promised to love her until death do them part. The real war was about to begin. Sarah spent the night going through every digital trail she could find, her pregnant body aching from hours hunched over David's computer. What she discovered made her stomach turn. Email chains between David and Charlotte going back 3 years. Photos from business trips that Sarah thought David had taken alone. Credit card statements showing purchases at romantic restaurants and luxury hotels that she had never seen. But the worst part was reading Charlotte's messages to David about her. They had turned Sarah's fertility struggles into cruel jokes, mocking her desperation to have a baby, her mood swings from the hormones, even her choice of maternity clothes. Charlotte had written things that no real friend would ever think, let alone put into words. Your wife looked so pathetic today at the client meeting. I almost felt sorry for her, waddling around in that hideous dress, talking about nursery designs like anyone cares about her domestic fantasy. Sarah had to run to the bathroom to throw up after reading that message. The morning sickness that had plagued her early pregnancy seemed mild compared to the nausea that came from discovering the depth of Charlotte's betrayal. When David left for work the next morning without saying a word to her, Sarah knew she had to face Charlotte. She couldn't let another day pass pretending that everything was normal when her world had been completely destroyed. The Wellington and Hayes luxury interior showroom in West Hollywood was Sarah's pride and joy. She had designed every inch of it herself, creating a space that showcased their combined talents and vision. Walking into it now felt like entering enemy territory. Charlotte was at her desk, perfectly put together in a designer suit that Sarah now realized David had probably paid for. Her blonde hair was styled in soft waves, her makeup flawless. She looked up as Sarah entered, and her face lit up with what Sarah now knew was a completely fake smile. Sarah, what a wonderful surprise. You look absolutely glowing today. Pregnancy definitely agrees with you. Charlotte stood up and moved to hug her, but Sarah stepped back. We need to talk, Sarah said quietly. Something flickered in Charlotte's eyes, but her smile never wavered. Of course. Is everything okay? You seem upset. Sarah pulled out her phone and showed Charlotte the screenshot of the text message. This is what's wrong. This is what I found on David's phone yesterday. For just a moment, Charlotte's mask slipped. Sarah saw calculation behind her eyes, the quick mental assessment of how much damage control would be needed. Then the mask was back in place, and Charlotte looked shocked and confused. Sarah, I have no idea what this is. Someone must be playing a cruel joke. Why would you even think I would? I mean, David is like a brother to me. This is obviously some kind of mistake. 3 years. Charlotte, I've seen the emails, the photos, the credit card statements. 3 years of you pretending to be my friend while you were sleeping with my husband behind my back. Charlotte's facade cracked further. Sarah, you're being irrational. Pregnancy hormones can make women paranoid, and don't you dare blame this on pregnancy hormones? Sarah's voice rose, causing several employees in the showroom to look their way. You were there when I cried about our marriage problems. You held my hand during fertility treatments. You helped me design my baby's nursery while you were sleeping with my husband. Charlotte glanced around nervously, clearly aware that their conversation was attracting attention. Maybe we should discuss this privately, she said, gesturing toward the conference room. Once they were alone, Charlotte's entire demeanor changed. The sweet, concerned friend disappeared, replaced by someone Sarah had never seen before. Fine, Charlotte said, her voice cold. You want the truth. David hasn't been happy for years. Sarah, years. You've been so obsessed with getting pregnant that you forgot how to be a wife. When was the last time you dressed up for him? When was the last time you made him feel desired instead of just needed for his sperm? Sarah felt as if she had been slapped. I was trying to have his baby. We both wanted children. No, you wanted children. David wanted his wife back. The woman he married was fun and spontaneous and made him laugh. You became this desperate, baby-obsessed woman who scheduled sex and cried when you got your period. Do you know how exhausting it is to be around someone that needy? Each word was designed to hurt, and they hit their mark perfectly. Sarah had to grip the conference table to keep from collapsing. So you decided to comfort him? Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I gave him what you couldn't. Charlotte said with a shrug. Attention, appreciation, passion, things that apparently disappear when a woman becomes obsessed with her biological clock. You were my best friend. I was a friend who watched you slowly destroy your marriage and decided to be there for your husband when you weren't. Charlotte pulled out her own phone and showed Sarah a text from David. It's over between us. He chose me. Sarah, last night was the last time he'll ever hurt me by pretending he might work things out with you. Sarah stared at the message, the words blurring as tears filled her eyes. You're lying. He wouldn't just abandon his child. Charlotte's smile was cruel. Are you sure about that? David never really wanted children. Sarah, that was all your dream, your obsession. Now he's free to start over with someone who actually makes him happy. But then something unexpected happened. Charlotte's expression softened, and she reached across the table to touch Sarah's hand. Look, I know this is hard to hear, but maybe this is for the best. You're having a baby, which is what you always wanted. David and I, we love each other. Sarah, this isn't just some sordid affair. We're planning a future together, but I never wanted to hurt you like this. If there was a way we could all move forward without destroying our friendship. Sarah looked at Charlotte's face, searching for any sign of the woman who had been her maid of honor, who had celebrated every milestone in her life, who had been like a sister to her for over a decade. For a moment, she almost believed that this could be salvaged somehow. The hormones, the shock, the desperation to hold on to something familiar in her crumbling world. It all made Charlotte's words seem almost reasonable. I don't know how we could ever get past this, Sarah said slowly. We're both strong women, Charlotte said, squeezing her hand. We built this business together. We've been through so much. Maybe we can find a way to work through this that doesn't destroy everything we've built. Sarah wanted to believe her. God, how she wanted to believe that somewhere in this nightmare, she could salvage her friendship, her business, something that felt like home. I need time to think, Sarah said finally. Of course, Charlotte said, her voice gentle again. Take all the time you need. I'll be here when you're ready to talk. Sarah left the showroom feeling more confused than ever. Was it possible that Charlotte was right? Had she become so focused on having a baby that she had neglected her marriage? Was there a way to move forward that didn't involve losing everything she had built? She drove home in a daze, actually considering the possibility that maybe, somehow, this could work out. Maybe they could co-parent with David and Charlotte. Maybe their business could survive. Maybe she didn't have to lose everything. It wasn't until she was pulling into her driveway that she remembered the security cameras. David had installed a comprehensive security system throughout their properties 2 years ago, including the houses they used for client consultations and staging. Sarah had complete access to all the feeds through an app on her phone. With trembling fingers, she opened the app and began scrolling through archived footage from their various properties. What she found made her realize that Charlotte's performance in the conference room had been just that, a performance. The Hamptons estate that Sarah had spent months renovating as a surprise for David's 40th birthday. The footage showed David and Charlotte there together at least a dozen times over the past 2 years, using it as their private retreat. The cottage in Sonoma that Sarah had designed for romantic getaways with David. They had been there too, making love in the bed where Sarah had dreamed of reconnecting with her husband. But the worst footage was from just last week, while Sarah was at a doctor's appointment, David and Charlotte in Sarah's own kitchen, making breakfast together like a married couple. Charlotte was wearing one of Sarah's designer robes, laughing as David fed her strawberries. She actually thinks we might all be friends after this, Charlotte said in the video, her voice carrying clearly through the kitchen's audio system. Poor, desperate Sarah. She's so pathetic she'd probably agree to babysit for us if we asked nicely. David laughed, pulling Charlotte close. Give her time. She'll sign whatever we want once the shock wears off. Sarah's always been too soft for her own good. Just promise me we won't have to pretend much longer, Charlotte said, nuzzling David's neck. I'm tired of acting like I care about her pregnancy drama. The woman is exhausting. Sarah threw her phone across the car, watching it shatter against the passenger window. The screen went black, but she could still hear their laughter echoing in her ears. Everything Charlotte had said in the conference room had been a lie designed to manipulate her. They weren't sorry. They weren't conflicted. They were playing games with her, enjoying her pain, planning to continue using her even after destroying her marriage. Sarah sat in her car in her own driveway, rain beginning to patter against the windshield, and felt something break inside her chest. Not her heart, that had been shattered yesterday. This was something deeper, the last of her innocence, her trust, her belief that people were fundamentally good. She looked up at the house where she had been so happy just 24 hours ago, where she had dreamed of bringing her baby home to loving parents and a stable family. The windows glowed warmly in the approaching dusk, but they no longer looked welcoming. They looked like the eyes of a predator, watching and waiting. Charlotte and David thought they could manipulate her, use her, discard her when she was no longer useful. They thought she was weak, desperate, pathetic. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Sarah walked into her house with purpose for the first time since discovering the affair. She had work to do, calls to make, plans to formulate. If Charlotte and David wanted to play games, she would show them what a real game looked like. The naive, trusting woman who had left this house that morning was gone forever. In her place was someone harder, smarter, and infinitely more dangerous. The war had officially begun. Sarah spent the weekend researching divorce attorneys who specialized in high-net-worth cases involving tech moguls and their complex financial arrangements. She needed someone who understood that millionaire husband cheating scandals often involve sophisticated attempts to hide assets and minimize financial settlements for betrayed wives. Elena Rodriguez came highly recommended by 3 different legal directories and had a reputation for aggressive advocacy in luxury divorce cases. Her downtown Los Angeles office exuded competence and success, from the designer furniture to the wall of legal awards and high-profile case victories. "Mrs. Wellington," Elena said, rising from behind her impressive mahogany desk, "I've read the preliminary information you provided, and I want you to know that you've come to the right place. Cases involving Billionaire Asset Division require special expertise, and unfortunately, your situation is more common than you might think." Elena was in her early 50s, impeccably dressed in a charcoal gray suit that spoke of both professionalism and power. Her dark hair was pulled back in a sleek chignon, and her brown eyes conveyed both warmth and steel. Sarah immediately felt that this was someone who would fight for her. "How bad is it?" Sarah asked, settling into the plush leather chair across from Elena's desk. "Potentially very bad," Elena said frankly. "Your husband has been consulting with Morrison, Blake and Associates for the past 6 months. They're the go-to firm for wealthy men who want to minimize their financial exposure in divorce proceedings. The fact that he started planning this before you even got pregnant tells me we're dealing with someone who has been strategically positioning himself for some time." Sarah felt sick. "What does that mean for me and my baby?" "It means we need to move fast and smart," Elena said, pulling out a thick folder. "I've already begun preliminary research into your husband's business interests, and what I've found is concerning. Wellington Technologies appears to be in the process of restructuring in ways that could potentially shield assets from divorce settlements." Elena spread several documents across her desk. "Your husband has been transferring significant holdings to offshore accounts, setting up shell companies, and creating complex investment structures that make it very difficult to determine his true net worth. This is classic behavior for someone preparing for a contentious divorce while trying to claim reduced ability to pay spousal support or child support." "But his company is worth billions," Sarah protested. "He can't just hide that." "He can't hide the company itself, but he can manipulate his personal stake in it," Elena explained. "For example, he's transferred a significant portion of his shares to what appears to be a charitable foundation. On paper, it looks philanthropic. In reality, it's likely a way to control those assets while claiming he no longer owns them outright." Sarah stared at the documents. trying to process the complexity of David's deception. How long has this been going on? Based on the filing dates, at least 2 years. But Mrs. Wellington, there's something else we need to discuss that's even more troubling. Elena pulled out another set of papers. Your interior design business, Wellington and Hayes Luxury Interiors. According to these corporate filings, your husband has been gradually increasing his financial stake in the company without your knowledge. He now owns 60% of the business you built. That's impossible, Sarah said, her voice barely a whisper. Charlotte and I are equal partners. We've always been equal partners. Not according to these documents, Elena said gently. It appears that Ms. Hayes has been selling her shares to your husband over the past 18 months. You now own only 30% of your own company. The room seemed to spin around Sarah. Every successful project, every satisfied client, every late night she had spent building their business. David had been systematically stealing it from her while Charlotte helped. There's more, Elena continued. The company's most lucrative contracts have been redirected to a new firm that Ms. Hayes established 6 months ago. Wellington and Hayes is essentially a shell at this point. While Hayes Design International has taken over most of your high-end clientele, Sarah gripped the arms of her chair to keep from falling over. She stole our clients with your husband's help. Yes, he provided her with client contact information, project details, and even some of your proprietary design concepts. The Rothschild family renovation that you spent months planning, Hayes Design International, is now handling that project, using your original designs. The betrayal was so complete, so calculated, that Sarah couldn't speak for several minutes. She had thought the affair was the worst thing they could do to her. This was so much worse. They hadn't just stolen her husband and destroyed her marriage. They had systematically dismantled everything she had worked for. What are my options? She finally managed to ask. We fight, Elena said firmly. We file for divorce immediately and request emergency orders to prevent further asset dissipation. We demand forensic accounting of all marital property and business interests. And we prepare for the fact that this is going to be a very ugly, very public battle. As if summoned by their conversation, Sarah's phone rang. It was her doctor's office. Elena nodded for her to take the call. Mrs. Wellington, this is Dr. Martinez's office. We need you to come in immediately for some additional tests. We found some concerns in your recent blood work that require immediate attention. Sarah's free hand went to her belly protectively. What kind of concerns? Elevated protein levels that could indicate preeclampsia. We need to monitor you closely and possibly put you on bed rest. Can you come in this afternoon? Sarah hung up the phone and looked at Elena with tears in her eyes. I have to go to the doctor. There might be complications with my pregnancy. Go, Elena said immediately, standing up and walking around her desk. And Mrs. Wellington, take someone with you. Don't go through this alone. Sarah drove to the medical center in a haze of fear and anger. David should be with her. Her husband should be holding her hand and reassuring her that everything would be okay with their baby. Instead, he was probably with Charlotte, planning their next move in the systematic destruction of Sarah's life. At the medical center, Sarah sat alone in the waiting room, watching other pregnant women with their supportive partners. She pulled out her phone to call David, but stopped when she saw Charlotte's latest Instagram story. The image showed Charlotte's manicured hand holding a champagne glass against the backdrop of what was clearly a private jet. The caption read, "Sometimes the best business meetings happen at 30,000 feet. Grateful for partners who share the same vision for the future." The location tags showed they were en route to Saint-Tropez, while Sarah sat alone in a hospital waiting room, scared for her baby's health and her own future. David and Charlotte were jetting off to the French Riviera, toasting their success in destroying her life. Mrs. Wellington, Dr. Martinez appeared, his expression serious. Let's talk about your test results. Sarah followed him into his office, her hands shaking as she took the seat across from his desk. Your blood pressure is elevated, and we're seeing protein in your urine, he explained gently. These are early signs of preeclampsia, which can be very serious if left untreated. I'm afraid I'm going to have to recommend immediate bed rest and very limited activity. For how long, Sarah asked? Potentially for the remainder of your pregnancy. I know this is difficult news, especially given what you mentioned about stress in your personal life, but we need to prioritize the health of both you and your baby. Sarah nodded numbly. Bed rest meant she couldn't fight for her business. She couldn't attend depositions or court hearings. She would be trapped and helpless while David and Charlotte continued to dismantle everything she had built. Dr. Martinez, she said quietly, if the father of my baby isn't available to help care for me during this time, what are my options? The doctor's expression softened with understanding. We can discuss home health care, family support systems, or even short-term residential care if necessary. The important thing is that you have a safe, low-stress environment where you can focus on your health and your baby's health. As Sarah left the medical center with a stack of prescriptions and instructions for bed rest, she felt more alone than she ever had in her life. Her marriage was over. Her best friend had betrayed her business was being stolen from under her, and now her pregnancy was at risk. She sat in her car in the medical center parking lot and tried to call her sister Jane in Chicago. It was the first time she had reached out to anyone in her family since discovering David's affair. She had been too ashamed, too devastated to admit what was happening. Sarah. Jane's voice was warm and concerned. I was just thinking about you. How are you feeling? How's the pregnancy going? Sarah broke down completely, sobbing into the phone as she told Jane everything that had happened. The affair, the business betrayal, the financial manipulation, the pregnancy complications. It all came pouring out in a flood of pain and fear. I'm coming to Los Angeles, Jane said immediately. Don't argue with me. You're not going through this alone. I can work remotely for a few weeks, and you need family right now. Jane, you don't understand how bad this is, Sarah said through her tears. David has billions of dollars and teams of lawyers. Charlotte has stolen everything we built together. I don't even know if I can afford to fight them. Then we'll figure it out together, Jane said firmly. And Sarah, there's something I need to tell you. Something about David that I probably should have mentioned years ago. What do you mean? Jane was quiet for a long moment. I work in financial forensics. Remember a few years ago, my firm was hired to investigate some irregularities in tech company finances. David's company wasn't our target, but his name came up in some cross-referenced documents. I saw some things that made me question his business practices, but I didn't say anything because you were so happy, and I thought maybe I was misreading the situation. Sarah's blood ran cold. What kind of things? Offshore accounts, shell companies, questionable investment structures. At the time, I told myself it was probably just aggressive tax planning, but Sarah, the patterns I saw, they looked like someone who was systematically moving money around to hide it. Why didn't you tell me? Because you were happy, and I hoped I was wrong. But now, given what's happening with your divorce, Sarah, I think David has been planning this for much longer than either of us realized, and I think I can help you prove it. For the first time since finding that text message, Sarah felt a spark of hope. Maybe she wasn't as helpless as she felt. Maybe there were people who would fight for her after all. There's just one problem, Jane continued, her voice hesitant. The investigation I worked on, my supervisor just called to tell me I'm being terminated, effective immediately. Apparently, there have been complaints about my professional ethics and conflicts of interest. They're saying I used company resources for personal research. The hope died as quickly as it had flared. Even Jane was being targeted now. David's reach was longer and more powerful than Sarah had imagined. I'm still coming, Jane said determinedly. Being unemployed just means I can focus all my attention on helping you. We're going to fight this. Sarah, we're going to win. As Sarah drove home to her empty mansion, she tried to hold on to Jane's confidence, but the house felt like a mausoleum now, filled with memories of a life that had been built on lies. She walked through rooms that she had lovingly decorated, past photographs of happier times that now seemed like evidence of her own naivety. In David's study, she noticed his laptop was still open on his desk. She approached it cautiously, wondering if he had changed his passwords or taken additional security measures. To her surprise, it was still logged into his personal email account. Sarah's hands trembled as she scrolled through his recent messages. Most were business-related or communications with his legal team. But then she found a folder labeled Project Fresh Start. She clicked on it and found dozens of documents and email chains that made her blood run cold. David wasn't just hiding assets for their divorce. He was planning to fake his company's bankruptcy while hiding billions in cryptocurrency and offshore accounts. He was going to claim financial hardship to minimize her settlement while secretly maintaining access to enormous wealth. But there was more. The emails revealed that this wasn't his first time orchestrating such a scheme. There were references to previous relationships, other women who had been discarded after serving their purpose. Charlotte wasn't his true love. She was just the latest in a pattern of manipulation and betrayal. Sarah printed everything she could before David returned home. As she gathered the documents, she realized that she now held the key to exposing David's crimes. But she also knew that possessing this information made her dangerous to him. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Stop digging or you'll regret it. Some secrets are worth killing for." Sarah looked around the empty house that no longer felt like home and realized that the war she thought was beginning was already much more dangerous than she had imagined. The threatening text message changed everything for Sarah. What had started as a marital betrayal was clearly something much more sinister. She spent the night in the guest room with a chair wedged against the door, jumping at every sound in the house that had once felt like a sanctuary. Jane arrived from Chicago the next morning, taking one look at Sarah's exhausted face and immediately taking charge. She was 5 years younger than Sarah, but had always been the more practical sister, the one who faced problems head-on rather than hoping they would resolve themselves. "First things first," Jane said, setting down her suitcase in the foyer. "We're getting you out of this house. It's not safe, and you need to be somewhere David can't intimidate you or monitor your communications." "But the doctor said I need bed rest," Sarah protested weakly. "Bed rest doesn't mean you have to stay in the same bed where that bastard has been lying to you for years," Jane replied firmly. "We're finding you a secure location where you can rest safely while we build our case." Elena Rodriguez had recommended a discreet residence hotel in Beverly Hills that catered to high-profile individuals going through difficult divorces. The suite was beautiful but impersonal, which Sarah found oddly comforting. There were no memories here, no reminders of the life that had been stolen from her. As Sarah settled into bed with strict instructions to limit her activity, Jane spread documents across the dining table and got to work. Her background in financial forensics was proving invaluable as she traced the complex web of David's hidden assets. "This is even worse than I thought," Jane said, looking up from her laptop. "David hasn't just been hiding money from you. He's been running what essentially amounts to a Ponzi scheme through his company. He's been using new investor money to pay returns to earlier investors while siphoning enormous amounts into personal accounts." "How is that possible?" Sarah asked from the bedroom, where she was trying to follow doctor's orders while staying engaged in the fight for her future. "Tech companies can get away with a lot because their valuations are often based on potential rather than concrete assets," Jane explained. "David has been manipulating stock prices, inflating the company's worth, and convincing investors to pour money into projects that don't actually exist." Elena arrived that afternoon with more devastating news. "David's legal team has filed for emergency custody of your unborn child," she announced. "They're claiming that your pregnancy complications are the result of mental instability and that you're unfit to care for a child." Sarah felt the room spin around her. "How can they claim custody of a baby that hasn't even been born yet?" "They're using your doctor's recommendation for bed rest as evidence of your inability to function as a parent," Elena explained. "They've also somehow obtained records of your therapy sessions from 2 years ago when you were dealing with depression after your miscarriages. They're painting a picture of a woman who is mentally fragile and potentially dangerous." Those therapy sessions were confidential, Sarah said, her voice rising despite her need to stay calm for the baby. How did they get access to private medical records? Elena's expression was grim. That's what we need to find out. Someone with significant resources and connections has been helping them build this case. This level of access to confidential information suggests they have people on the inside. As if to punctuate Elena's words, Sarah's phone buzzed with a news alert. Her heart sank as she read the headline. Pregnant wife of tech billionaire, desperate and delusional. Sources close to the family reveal troubling behavior. The article, published on a popular gossip blog, painted Sarah as an unstable woman who had become obsessed with having a baby and had driven her husband away with her desperate and demanding behavior. It quoted anonymous sources describing her as emotionally manipulative and suggested that her pregnancy complications were psychosomatic. Charlotte, Sarah whispered, recognizing the details that only her former best friend would know. She's feeding them information about my private medical issues, my therapy sessions, everything I ever told her in confidence. Jane looked up from her computer with fury in her eyes. This is character assassination. They're trying to destroy your reputation to strengthen their custody case. The article included details about Sarah's fertility struggles that only someone very close to her would know. It described her obsessive tracking of ovulation cycles and her desperate attempts to control her husband's schedule around her biological needs. The language was clearly designed to make her sound unhinged rather than like a woman simply trying to conceive. But the worst part was the final paragraph. Friends worry that Wellington's increasingly erratic behavior may pose a risk to her unborn child. She's not thinking clearly, says one source close to the family. The stress of her failing marriage has really taken a toll on her mental health. We need to respond to this immediately, Elena said. Every day we let this narrative stand unchallenged makes our case harder to win. But before they could formulate a response, Sarah's phone rang. It was Dr. Martinez's office with news that made her blood pressure spike dangerously. Mrs. Wellington, I'm afraid your test results show that your condition is worsening, the nurse explained. Dr. Martinez wants to see you immediately. Your blood pressure is approaching dangerous levels, and we're concerned about both your health and the baby's. At the medical center, Dr. Martinez's expression was grave as he reviewed Sarah's latest test results. I'm afraid I have to recommend immediate hospitalization, he said. Your preeclampsia is progressing rapidly, and we need to monitor you continuously. For how long? Sarah asked, though she dreaded the answer. Potentially until delivery. I know this isn't what you want to hear, but we're looking at a high-risk pregnancy that requires intensive medical supervision. Sarah's world collapsed further. Hospitalization would leave her completely vulnerable to David's legal maneuvers. She wouldn't be able to participate in her own defense or protect the evidence Jane had been gathering. Doctor, she said carefully, what if I told you that the stress causing my condition isn't just from normal pregnancy concerns? What if I'm dealing with a dangerous situation that requires me to be able to protect myself and my unborn child? Dr. Martinez studied her face carefully. Mrs. Wellington, are you in physical danger? Because if you are, we need to involve the appropriate authorities. I don't know, Sarah admitted. My husband has been hiding assets and planning this divorce for years. I've received threatening messages. I'm afraid that if I'm hospitalized and helpless, he might try to force medical decisions that aren't in my best interest or the baby's. The doctor was quiet for a long moment. There are ways to protect you legally while ensuring you receive proper medical care, he said finally. But I need you to be completely honest with me about what you're facing. Sarah told him everything. The affair, the financial fraud, the threatening messages, the media assassination campaign. Dr. Martinez listened without judgment, occasionally making notes. I'm going to recommend a modified bed rest protocol, he said when she finished. You'll need to be in a controlled environment with medical supervision, but we can arrange for that outside of a traditional hospital setting. There are private medical facilities that specialize in high-risk pregnancies while providing additional security and privacy. As they were discussing options, Elena burst into the examination room with papers in her hand. "Sarah, we have a problem," she said breathlessly. "David has filed for an emergency injunction, freezing all your assets. Your credit cards have been canceled, your bank accounts frozen, and he's claiming you've been using marital funds to fund a vindictive campaign against him." Sarah stared at the legal documents, trying to process what this meant. "How can he freeze my access to our money?" "By claiming you're mentally unstable and a threat to marital assets," Elena explained. "It's a temporary measure, but it effectively leaves you with no financial resources while the case is pending." Dr. Martinez looked between the two women with growing concern. "Mrs. Wellington, this level of stress is extremely dangerous for both you and your baby. We need to get you stabilized immediately." But even as he spoke, Sarah's phone rang with another devastating blow. It was the insurance company. "Mrs. Wellington, I'm calling to inform you that your health insurance policy has been canceled due to non-payment of premiums," the representative explained in a bored voice. "Your husband, as the primary policyholder, has terminated coverage effective immediately." Sarah hung up the phone and looked at Elena with panic in her eyes. "He's cut off my health insurance. I can't afford medical care for a high-risk pregnancy without insurance." "This is a coordinated attack," Elena said grimly. "He's trying to force you into a position where you have no choice but to accept whatever terms he offers." Jane, who had been quiet during this exchange, suddenly looked up from her phone with an expression of horror. "Sarah," she said quietly, "I just got a call from my former employer. They're not just firing me. They're accusing me of embezzling funds and threatening to press criminal charges unless I return all the research I gathered about David's financial activities." "What does that mean?" Sarah asked, though she was afraid she already knew. "It means they're trying to discredit any evidence I found and potentially put me in prison to keep me from helping you." Jane replied, "David's reach is even longer than we thought." Sarah lay back on the examination table, feeling completely overwhelmed. In the span of a few hours, she had lost access to her money, her health insurance, and potentially the only ally who could help her prove David's financial crimes. The stress was making her blood pressure spike, which threatened both her life and her baby's. "There is one option," Elena said slowly, as if she were reluctant to suggest it. "I have a client who runs a foundation for women in situations like yours. They provide emergency financial assistance, legal support, and safe housing for wives who are being financially abused by wealthy husbands. It's not ideal, but it would give you resources to fight back." "What's the catch?" Sarah asked, because nothing in her life came without a catch anymore. "You'd have to go public with your story," Elena explained. "The foundation requires clients to share their experiences to help other women and to put pressure on abusive spouses. It would mean giving up any hope of privacy or reconciliation." Sarah thought about the gossip blog article painting her as desperate and delusional. Going public would mean opening herself up to even more media scrutiny and character assassination, but staying silent meant letting David and Charlotte destroy her completely. "Do it," she said finally. "Set up the meeting." But even as she made the decision to fight back publicly, Sarah's phone buzzed with a message that made her blood run cold. It was a photo of her sister Jane's apartment building with a message: "Your sister lives alone on the 4th floor, Unit 4B. It would be a shame if something happened to her." Sarah showed the message to Elena and Jane, watching both women go pale. "We need police protection," Elena said immediately. "The police will want to know who's threatening us and why," Jane pointed out. "Are we ready to hand over all our evidence and risk David destroying it before we can use it in court?" Sarah looked around the medical examination room where she sat in a hospital gown, surrounded by legal documents and evidence of her husband's crimes, carrying a baby whose father was systematically trying to destroy her life. The woman who had trusted everyone and believed in happy endings was gone. In her place was someone who understood that sometimes survival required making dangerous choices. "We're going to war," she said quietly. "Real war. And if David wants to play dirty, we'll show him what dirty really looks like. As she spoke, her water broke, sending amniotic fluid across the examination table and triggering immediate panic from Dr. Martinez. "We need to get you to labor and delivery now," he said, hitting the emergency button. "The baby is coming, ready or not." As Sarah was rushed to the delivery room with Elena and Jane running alongside her gurney, she realized that her child was about to be born into the middle of a war zone. The fight for her baby's future was literally beginning with her baby's birth. Baby Lily Wellington came into the world at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, 6 weeks early, but healthy and beautiful. As Sarah held her daughter for the first time, looking into those perfect tiny features, she felt a surge of protective love unlike anything she had ever experienced. This innocent child was depending on her to fight for their future together. David never came to the hospital. Sarah spent the first day after delivery in a haze of exhaustion, hormones, and medication. But by the second day, her determination had crystallized into something unbreakable. Jane had barely left her side, coordinating with Elena and handling the logistics of their legal battle while Sarah recovered from the premature delivery. "The foundation wants to meet with you as soon as you're discharged," Elena reported during her morning visit. "Margaret Stone, who runs the organization, is a remarkable woman. Her senator husband left her for his campaign manager 5 years ago, and she's been helping women in similar situations ever since." "What's the organization called?" Sarah asked, adjusting Lily in her arms. "Women Rising," Elena said. "They specialize in cases involving powerful men who use their wealth and connections to destroy their wives during divorces. Margaret has seen it all: tech moguls, politicians, entertainment executives, foreign diplomats. She says David's tactics are textbook financial abuse." That afternoon, Margaret Stone herself came to the hospital to meet Sarah. She was a striking woman in her mid-50s, with silver hair pulled back in an elegant chignon and the kind of quiet confidence that came from surviving the worst and emerging stronger. Her expensive but understated clothing spoke of someone who understood the world Sarah was navigating. "Mrs. Wellington," Margaret said, settling into the chair beside Sarah's bed. "I've reviewed your case with Elena, and I want you to know that you're not alone. What your husband is doing to you is a pattern I've seen dozens of times. Powerful men believe they can rewrite reality to suit their needs, but they're often not as clever as they think they are." "How do we fight someone with unlimited resources?" Sarah asked, unconsciously pulling Lily closer. "By being smarter than they are," Margaret replied. "By understanding that their arrogance is also their weakness. David thinks he's controlling the narrative, but he's actually creating evidence of his own wrongdoing every time he makes a move." Margaret pulled out a tablet and showed Sarah a series of news articles and social media posts. "For instance, this article about your desperate and delusional behavior. It contains information that could only have come from privileged medical communications. That's a federal crime. These threatening text messages you've received, they can be traced. The sudden cancellation of your health insurance during a high-risk pregnancy, that's spousal abuse under California law. But proving David was behind all of this will be easier than you think," Margaret interrupted. "Men like your husband become overconfident. They believe their money and connections make them untouchable, so they get sloppy. We're going to use that against them." Margaret explained that Women Rising had a network of allies throughout Los Angeles: journalists, private investigators, former law enforcement officers, and other women who had survived similar battles. They would help Sarah build her case while protecting her and Lily from further retaliation. "There's something else," Margaret said, leaning forward. "Elena tells me your sister discovered evidence of financial fraud before she was fired. I have a contact at the FBI who specializes in white-collar crime involving tech companies. If Jane's research is as damning as it sounds, we might be able to turn this from a divorce case into a federal criminal investigation." For the first time since discovering David's affair, Sarah felt like she might actually have a chance at winning. But as if the universe was determined to test her resolve, her phone rang with yet another crisis. "Sarah!" It was Charlotte's voice, but she sounded different, scared, almost panicked. We need to talk. There are things about David that you don't know, things that put you and the baby in real danger. Sarah looked at Margaret, who nodded and gestured for her to put the call on speaker. What are you talking about? Charlotte, Sarah asked, her voice ice cold. I can't talk about this over the phone, Charlotte said, her voice dropping to a whisper. But David isn't who you think he is. The affair, the business stuff, that's nothing compared to what he's really involved in. Meet me tomorrow night at our old spot in Malibu. Come alone, and I'll tell you everything. Why should I trust anything you say? Sarah demanded. Because if you don't, you and Lily are going to end up like his last wife, Charlotte said, and then the line went dead. Margaret and Sarah stared at each other in shock. His last wife, Margaret repeated. David was married before. Never, Sarah said firmly. I mean, he dated other people in college, but he was never married. I would have known. Margaret pulled out her phone and began typing rapidly. Let me check something. What's David's full legal name? David James Wellington, born in San Francisco, graduated from Stanford with a computer science degree. Margaret's expression grew increasingly troubled as she read from her phone screen. Sarah, I'm looking at public records for David James Wellington, and there are some significant gaps in his history. It's almost like his identity was constructed rather than lived. What do you mean? I mean, there's no David James Wellington who matches your husband's biographical details before 2003. No birth certificate in San Francisco. No Stanford graduation records. No employment history before he suddenly appeared in Silicon Valley with a tech startup and venture capital funding. Sarah felt the familiar sensation of her world shifting beneath her feet. That's impossible. I met him in 2003. We've been together for over 20 years. Which means whatever identity he was using before that, it's been completely scrubbed, Margaret said grimly. Sarah, I think your husband might be someone entirely different than who he's claimed to be. Jane arrived at the hospital an hour later with her laptop and a grim expression. I've been digging deeper into David's financial records using some unofficial channels, she said, glancing around to make sure they weren't overheard. Margaret's right. There are huge gaps in his digital footprint before 2003. But I found something else. She opened her laptop and showed them a series of documents. David's company, Wellington Technologies, was built on technology that was allegedly stolen from a research project at MIT. The original developer of the software died in a car accident in 2002, and somehow David acquired all the patents and intellectual property rights shortly afterward. Are you saying David killed someone? Sarah asked, her voice barely a whisper. I'm saying there are a lot of suspicious deaths and disappearances connected to David's rise in the tech world, Jane replied. Business partners who died in accidents, investors who vanished after asking too many questions, at least 2 former employees who committed suicide after threatening to go public with information about the company. Margaret studied the documents with the expression of someone who had seen similar patterns before. This explains the level of resources he has access to, she said. If David is involved in organized crime or intelligence work, he would have connections that go far beyond normal business networks. But what does this have to do with Charlotte's phone call? Sarah asked. Maybe Charlotte found out who David really is, Jane suggested. Maybe that's why she sounded scared. Margaret shook her head. Or maybe Charlotte has been working with him from the beginning, and this is another manipulation designed to isolate Sarah and make her vulnerable. Sarah looked down at baby Lily sleeping peacefully in her arms, blissfully unaware that her father might be a murderer, and her mother was trapped in a nightmare that kept getting worse. I have to meet with Charlotte, Sarah said finally. If there's even a chance she's telling the truth about David being dangerous, I need to know. For Lily's sake. Absolutely not, Margaret said firmly. If David is as dangerous as these documents suggest, walking into an isolated meeting could be a death sentence. Then what do you suggest? Sarah asked. Because right now, I'm trapped in a hospital room while a man who might be a killer has legal custody rights to my newborn daughter. I can't protect Lily by hiding forever. Margaret was quiet for a long moment, clearly weighing options. Finally, she spoke. We set a trap, she said. We make Charlotte think you're meeting her alone, but we have backup and surveillance. If she's genuinely trying to help, we protect her and get the information she has. If she's setting you up, we catch her in the act and use it as evidence. What if David realizes what we're doing? Then we'd better be ready for war, Margaret replied grimly. As they were discussing the details of the plan, Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Enjoyed seeing your sister's apartment today? Nice security system. Very easy to disable. Stop fighting or next time we won't just look around. Jane went pale as she read the message. They were in my apartment, she whispered. Someone was in my home. Sarah felt a surge of rage that surprised her with its intensity. These people had destroyed her marriage, stolen her business, threatened her pregnancy, and now they were terrorizing her family. She looked down at Lily's perfect sleeping face and made a decision that would change everything. Set up the meeting with Charlotte, she told Margaret. But we're not just going to gather information. We're going to end this. Sarah, you just gave birth 6 days ago, Elena protested. You can't, I can't. What Sarah interrupted. I can't protect my daughter. I can't fight for our future. I've spent the last 2 weeks being reactive, letting David and Charlotte make moves while I scrambled to respond. That ends now. Margaret studied Sarah's face and seemed to see something there that satisfied her. What did you have in mind? David thinks he's been so clever, manipulating me and destroying my life piece by piece, Sarah said, her voice growing stronger with each word. But he's made one crucial mistake. He underestimated what a mother will do to protect her child. As if summoned by her words, Dr. Martinez appeared in the doorway with discharge papers and a concerned expression. Mrs. Wellington, I'm releasing you to home care, but I need to stress that you're still recovering from a complicated delivery, he said. Limited activity, no stress, plenty of rest. Sarah signed the papers with a steady hand, knowing that she was about to do the exact opposite of everything the doctor was recommending, but sometimes protecting your family meant risking everything. Doctor, she said as she handed back the papers, what's the earliest I could travel internationally if I needed to? Dr. Martinez looked startled by the question. Mrs. Wellington, you shouldn't even be thinking about travel for at least 6 weeks, and that's assuming no complications. Why would you need to leave the country? Sarah looked at Margaret, Jane, and Elena, seeing her own determination reflected in their faces. Because I think we're going to need an exit strategy, she said quietly. As they prepared to leave the hospital with baby Lily, Sarah's phone rang one more time. This time it was David himself. Congratulations on the birth of our daughter, he said, his voice carrying that false warmth she now recognized as manipulation. I hope you're ready to discuss custody arrangements. I'm prepared to be very generous if you're reasonable. What does generous mean to you? David, Sarah asked, putting the call on speaker so the others could hear. Full custody to me, supervised visitation for you, and a settlement that will keep you comfortable as long as you don't cause any trouble. Charlotte is very excited about being Lily's mother. Sarah felt white-hot rage course through her veins. Charlotte will never be my daughter's mother. Actually, she will be, David said with casual cruelty. We're getting married next month, and we're planning to raise Lily together. You can be part of her life if you cooperate, or you can be written out of it entirely. Your choice. Over my dead body, Sarah said. That can be arranged too, David replied, and hung up. Margaret, Jane, and Elena stared at Sarah as the implications of David's threat sank in. Did he just threaten to kill you? Jane asked. He did, Sarah replied, buckling Lily into her car seat with hands that weren't quite steady. Which means we're past the point of playing by normal rules. As they drove away from the hospital toward their next battleground, Sarah looked at her daughter's perfect face in the rearview mirror and made a promise that she intended to keep. Mommy's going to keep you safe, baby girl. she whispered, "no matter what it takes." The war was about to begin in earnest. The private residence hotel suite felt more like home than Sarah's mansion ever would again. Jane had transformed the living area into a command center, with laptops, legal documents, and surveillance equipment covering every surface. Margaret's organization had provided security personnel who maintained a discreet but constant presence, and Elena worked around the clock preparing for the legal battles ahead. Sarah found an unexpected peace in the routine of caring for Lily while building their case against David. Feeding schedules and diaper changes provided a sense of normalcy amid the chaos, and every milestone, first smile, first successful nursing session, first full night's sleep, felt like a victory against the forces trying to tear their family apart. 3 weeks after Lily's birth, Charlotte called again. "Sarah, please," she said, her voice desperate. "I know you don't trust me, but I'm telling you the truth. David isn't who you think he is, and you and Lily are in real danger. I found things in his computer, documents that prove he's been lying about everything." Sarah looked at Margaret, who had been monitoring the call. Margaret nodded, indicating that their trace was working and they could pinpoint Charlotte's location. "What kind of documents?" Sarah asked. "Marriage certificates," Charlotte whispered. "At least 3 of them, under different names. And death certificates, too." "Sarah, I think he's killed his previous wives." Sarah's blood ran cold. "Where are you calling from?" "I'm hiding at my brother's cabin in Big Sur. David thinks I'm on a spa retreat, but I've been going through his files. Sarah, he's been planning to get rid of me too. I was never supposed to be his next wife. I was supposed to be his accomplice and then his next victim." "Charlotte, if this is another manipulation—" "It's not," Charlotte interrupted, and for the first time, Sarah heard genuine terror in her voice. "He's been drugging me. Sarah, little amounts of something that made me compliant, made me do things I would never normally do. The affair, stealing your business contacts, helping him hide assets. I thought I was making those choices, but now I realize I wasn't thinking clearly." Margaret gestured for Sarah to keep Charlotte talking while she coordinated with their surveillance team. "How do I know you're telling the truth?" Sarah asked. "Because I'm sending you copies of everything I found," Charlotte said. "And because I'm scared. Sarah, really scared. He told me yesterday that our partnership was coming to an end, and the way he looked at me, I think he's planning to kill me before your divorce trial." Sarah's phone chimed with incoming files, dozens of documents that made her stomach turn. Marriage certificates for women named Jennifer Blackwood, Michelle Torres, and Susan Chen. Death certificates for the same women, all listing accidents as the cause of death. Photos of David with each woman, looking exactly as happy and devoted as he had in his photos with Sarah. But the most chilling document was a list in David's handwriting titled Cleanup Protocol, which detailed how to eliminate loose ends and problematic witnesses. Charlotte's name was at the top of the list, followed by Sarah's and Jane's. "Jesus Christ," Jane breathed, reading over Sarah's shoulder. "He's a serial killer?" "He's been practicing this for years," Margaret said grimly. "The identity changes, the financial manipulation, the systematic destruction of his wife's support systems. It's a refined method." "Charlotte," Sarah said into the phone, "where exactly are you? We're coming to get you." "You can't," Charlotte said, her voice breaking. "He's watching all of you." "But Sarah, there's something else, something about your pregnancy that you need to know." "What do you mean?" "The complications you had, the preeclampsia that started so suddenly. I think he was poisoning you too. I found research in his computer about drugs that can trigger pregnancy complications without being detected in standard blood tests." Sarah felt the room spin around her. "He tried to kill our baby. He wanted you incapacitated," Charlotte said. "Unable to fight the divorce or protect yourself. But when you went into labor early, it messed up his timeline. He needed more time to position himself legally before the baby was born." Margaret grabbed the phone from Sarah. "Charlotte, this is Margaret Stone. I'm going to connect you with FBI agent Sarah Martinez, who specializes in cases like this. You need federal protection immediately. You don't understand, Charlotte said, her voice rising with panic. He has people inside law enforcement. He's been bragging about having contacts in the FBI and the local police. That's how he's been staying ahead of investigations all these years. Before anyone could respond, they heard sounds of struggle on Charlotte's end of the call, crashing, shouting, and then Charlotte screaming. He found me. He's here, Sarah. Don't trust anyone in. The line went dead. Margaret immediately called her FBI contact while Jane worked frantically to trace Charlotte's location. Sarah sat frozen, holding Lily close, as the reality of their situation sank in completely. We need to disappear, Sarah said quietly. Tonight. If David found Charlotte, he knows we've been working together. We're all targets now. Sarah, running will make you look guilty, Elena protested. It will destroy our legal case. What legal case? Sarah asked bitterly. You heard Charlotte. David has people inside law enforcement. How are we supposed to get justice from a system he's already compromised? Margaret hung up her phone with a grim expression. My FBI contact is legitimate, but she agrees that we can't trust the normal channels. She's sending a team to Big Sur to look for Charlotte, but she thinks our best bet is to gather more evidence while keeping you and Lily safe. How do we do that? By making David think he's won, Margaret said. We stage your surrender. Make him believe you're giving up and accepting his terms. That will make him confident enough to get sloppy, and hopefully we can catch him making a mistake. Jane looked up from her computer with excitement. I think I found something. David's been using a private military contractor called Blackwater Solutions for his security needs. They specialize in making problems disappear permanently. What kind of problems? Sarah asked, though she was afraid she already knew. Whistleblowers, journalists, ex-wives who know too much? Jane replied. I found payment records going back 5 years. 3 of them correspond exactly with the dates those other women died. Margaret studied the documents. This is exactly what we need to take to federal authorities. But we need to be strategic about how we do it. If David has contacts inside the FBI, we have to find the right people to trust. As they were planning their next move, Sarah's phone rang with a call from David himself. Hello, Sarah, he said, his voice carrying a false warmth that now sounded sinister. I hope you and Lily are adjusting well to your new living situation. How did you know where we are? Sarah asked, though she dreaded the answer. I know where you are at all times, David replied casually. I also know that you've been talking to Charlotte. Such a shame what happened to her. What do you mean, poor Charlotte had a terrible accident at her brother's cabin? Apparently, she fell down some stairs and broke her neck. These old mountain cabins can be so dangerous, especially for city girls who aren't used to rustic living. Sarah's hands began to shake. You killed her. I didn't kill anyone, David said with mock innocence. But I do think Charlotte's tragic accident should serve as a reminder that this situation has gotten far too complicated. It's time for you to be reasonable. Sarah? What do you want? Simple. You sign over full custody of Lily to me, accept a minimal financial settlement, and disappear quietly. In return, you and your sister get to live. Keep fighting me, and you'll end up like Charlotte. Sarah looked around the room at the people who had been helping her, Margaret, Jane, Elena, and realized that David was threatening all of them. I need time to think, she said. You have 24 hours, David replied. After that, I start reducing the number of people around you until you're ready to be reasonable. He hung up, leaving Sarah staring at her phone in horror. He's going to kill all of you, she whispered. Anyone who's helping me is a target. Then we'd better make sure he doesn't get the chance, Margaret said firmly. Jane, how quickly can you create backup copies of all our evidence and get them to secure locations? A few hours, Jane replied. Elena, can you file emergency motions to get all of this into court records where it becomes public information? If I work through the night, yes. Margaret turned to Sarah with determination in her eyes. And you're going to call David back and agree to meet with him. But this time, we're going to be ready for him. Margaret, I can't risk. You can't risk not taking action, Margaret interrupted. David is systematically eliminating everyone who can help you. Eventually, it will just be you and Lily alone against him. We need to end this now, while we still have allies and evidence. Sarah looked down at Lily sleeping peacefully in her arms, completely trusting that her mother would keep her safe. The weight of that trust was overwhelming, but it also gave Sarah a strength she didn't know she possessed. What did you have in mind? Margaret smiled, and for the first time, it looked predatory. We're going to give David exactly what he thinks he wants, and then we're going to destroy him. As the team worked through the night preparing for what they all knew could be their final confrontation with David, Sarah found herself thinking about the woman she had been just a month ago. That woman had trusted blindly, believed in fairness and justice, assumed that good people would prevail simply because they were good. That woman was gone forever. In her place was someone harder, smarter, and infinitely more dangerous. Someone who understood that sometimes protecting the innocent required becoming something darker than your enemies. Sarah kissed Lily's forehead and made a promise that echoed in the quiet suite like a battle cry. Mommy's going to end this, baby girl. One way or another, you're going to grow up safe and free. The final battle was about to begin. Sarah's plan required her to become someone she had never been before. A manipulator, a liar, someone capable of playing the kind of games that David had been winning for years. The transformation felt like putting on armor made of ice, protective but fundamentally changing who she was inside. The first step was making David believe he had won. David, she said when she called him back the next morning, her voice carefully crafted to sound defeated and desperate. I've been thinking about what you said, and you're right. I can't keep fighting you. I don't have the resources or the strength, and I'm scared for Lily's safety. I'm glad you're finally being reasonable, David replied, and Sarah could hear the satisfaction in his voice. What are your terms? I want to see you in person, Sarah said. I need to look you in the eye when we discuss Lily's future. Can we meet somewhere neutral, somewhere safe? David was quiet for a moment, clearly considering whether this might be a trap. Where did you have in mind the Chateau Marmont? Sarah suggested. The restaurant, during lunch. Public enough to be safe. Private enough to talk freely? Fine, David agreed. Today at 1 o'clock. Come alone. Sarah, if I see any of your new friends, the deal is off. After hanging up, Sarah turned to Margaret and the team they had assembled overnight. In addition to Elena and Jane, there were now 2 former FBI agents who worked with Women Rising, a private investigator who specialized in domestic abuse cases, and a journalist from the Los Angeles Times who had been investigating David's business practices independently. Phase 1 is recording his confession, Margaret explained. Sarah will be wearing multiple recording devices and will have surveillance teams positioned throughout the hotel. If David admits to any crimes or makes any threats, we'll have evidence that can't be disputed. What if he doesn't confess? Sarah asked. Then we move to phase 2, Margaret replied. We make him think you're about to expose him publicly, and we record his reaction. Men like David can't help themselves when they think they're losing control. He'll reveal more than he intends to. Jane looked up from her laptop with concern. I've been monitoring David's communications, and he's been very active this morning. Multiple calls to that military contractor, transfers of significant amounts of money to offshore accounts, and something that looks like travel arrangements. He's planning to run, Elena realized. If this meeting doesn't go the way he wants, he's going to disappear with Lily. Not if we stop him first, Sarah said, checking the concealed recording devices one more time. Is everyone clear on the timeline? Margaret nodded. You have the meeting at 1. If you're not back by 3, we assume something has gone wrong and we involve law enforcement directly. The journalist publishes her story about David's criminal activities at 4, regardless of what happens at the meeting. And if David tries to take Lily and run, we have people watching his house, his office, and his private jet. Margaret replied, "He's not leaving the country with your daughter." As Sarah prepared to leave for the most dangerous meeting of her life, she spent a few minutes alone with Lily. The baby was awake and alert, looking up at her mother with those clear blue eyes that reminded Sarah so much of David when she had first fallen in love with him. "I'm going to tell you about your father someday," Sarah whispered to her daughter. "The real truth about who he is and what he did. But I'm also going to tell you about how we fought back, how we refused to be victims, how we protected each other." The Lily made a small sound that might have been agreement or might have been gas, but Sarah chose to interpret it as encouragement. The Chateau Marmont was exactly as Sarah remembered. Elegant, discreet, the kind of place where celebrities and power brokers conducted business away from prying eyes. David was already seated at a corner table when she arrived, looking every inch the successful billionaire in his perfectly tailored suit. He stood when he saw her, and for a moment, Sarah was transported back to their early dating days when he would stand when she entered a room, when his face would light up at the sight of her. The muscle memory of love and happiness was so strong that she almost forgot why she was there. "Sarah," he said, leaning in to kiss her cheek as if they were old friends meeting for lunch. "You look beautiful. Motherhood agrees with you." "Thank you," she replied, settling into the chair across from him. "How are you, David?" "I'm well," he said, signaling the waiter for champagne. "Looking forward to starting the next chapter of my life." "With Charlotte," Sarah said, letting just a hint of bitterness creep into her voice. David's expression flickered with something that might have been amusement. "Actually, Charlotte won't be joining me for that next chapter. She decided to take an extended vacation, somewhere very remote where she can reflect on her choices." Sarah felt sick knowing what David's euphemisms really meant, but she forced herself to stay in character. "I see. So it's just you and Lily moving forward." "For now," David agreed. "I think Lily needs stability. Don't you, a single parent who can provide for her without all the drama and emotional instability that seem to follow you around?" "I want what's best for Lily," Sarah said carefully. "That's why I'm here." David smiled, and Sarah realized that this was how he had looked at his previous wives right before he destroyed them. Confident, predatory, certain of his victory. "I'm glad you're finally seeing reason," he said. "I have papers for you to sign that will formalize our arrangement. Full custody to me, minimal visitation for you, and a settlement that will keep you comfortable as long as you don't cause any trouble." "How much?" Sarah asked. "5 million, David said casually, as if he were discussing the weather. "More than enough for you to start over somewhere else, somewhere far away from California." Sarah pretended to consider this. "What about my business, Wellington and Hayes Interior Design?" "Doesn't exist anymore," David said with a shrug. "Charlotte dissolved the partnership before her departure. But don't worry, you won't need to work with $5 million to live on." "David," Sarah said, leaning forward as if she were about to confess something important, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." "Of course. Did you ever love me even in the beginning?" David's expression softened slightly, and for a moment, Sarah thought she saw a flicker of the man she had married. "I did love you, Sarah. You were perfect for what I needed at the time. Beautiful, trusting, eager to build a life together. You made an excellent wife." "What changed?" "I did," David said simply. "My needs evolved. My business grew more complex. I required different things from my personal life. Like Charlotte." "Charlotte was useful," David said dismissively. "Young, easily influenced, willing to do whatever was necessary to help me achieve my goals. But she outlived her usefulness. Just like..." "Just like what?" David caught himself before finishing the sentence, but Sarah could see the calculation in his eyes. He was deciding how much truth he could reveal without creating problems for himself. "Just like all partnerships," he said finally. "They serve their purpose, and then they end." Sarah pressed her advantage. How many partnerships have you had? David, how many women like me in Charlotte? Does it matter? David asked, his voice taking on a slightly harder edge. The past is the past. Sarah, what matters is the future, and specifically whether you're going to sign these papers or whether I need to explore other options for resolving our situation. Other options like what happened to Charlotte. David's smile turned cold. Charlotte chose to take her vacation. No one forced her to leave. But someone forced her to fall down those stairs, didn't they? The temperature at their table seemed to drop several degrees. David studied Sarah's face carefully, clearly reassessing his assumptions about her knowledge and intentions. I think you've been talking to the wrong people. Sarah, he said quietly, people who have filled your head with ridiculous conspiracy theories and paranoid fantasies. Have I? Sarah asked, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Or have I finally started seeing you clearly for the first time? David leaned back in his chair, his expression shifting from confusion to anger to something much more dangerous. You're recording this conversation, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Am I? You're wearing a wire, and you've brought backup. This whole surrender act is just another manipulation. Sarah met his gaze without flinching. I learned from the best. David's mask dropped completely, revealing the cold, calculating predator that had been hiding behind the facade of the loving husband and successful businessman. You have no idea what you're dealing with, he said, his voice carrying a threat that made Sarah's blood run cold. You think your little support group and your amateur investigators are a match for me? I've been doing this longer than you've been alive. Sarah, I've buried people who were much smarter and much more dangerous than you. People like your previous wives. My previous wives understood their role in my life, David said. They played their parts until they were no longer needed, and then they moved on to whatever comes next. You could have done the same. You could have lived comfortably on your settlement and watched Lily grow up from a distance. But you had to be difficult. I had to protect my daughter. Your daughter, David laughed, but there was no humor in it. Lily is my daughter. Sarah, my blood, my legacy, my property. You were just the incubator I used to create her. Sarah felt rage course through her veins at hearing her child described as property, but she forced herself to stay calm. The recording devices were capturing everything, and David was revealing more than he realized. What about love? David, what about family? Love is a weakness that people like you use to justify your pathetic existence, David said dismissively. Family is a business arrangement designed to maximize genetic and financial advantages. Everything else is just sentiment. Is that what you told Jennifer Blackwood before you killed her, or Michelle Torres, or Susan Chen? David's expression went completely blank, and Sarah realized she had just made a fatal mistake. She had revealed that she knew about his previous identities and crimes, which meant she was no longer useful to him as a compliant ex-wife who could be bought off and sent away. You know what, Sarah, David said, his voice returning to that false warmth that she now understood was his most dangerous tone. I think our negotiation period has ended. It's time to move on to more direct methods of problem solving. He stood up from the table and dropped a $50 bill next to his untouched champagne. Enjoy your lunch. It's going to be your last meal in Los Angeles. As David walked away, Sarah realized that her plan had worked better than she had hoped. They had his confession on tape, his threats recorded, and his admission of multiple murders captured by multiple recording devices. But she also realized that she had just declared war on someone who had spent decades perfecting the art of making people disappear. Sarah remained at the table for exactly the amount of time Margaret had specified, then walked calmly out of the restaurant toward the car where Jane was waiting. She didn't run, didn't look over her shoulder, didn't show any sign of the terror that was coursing through her veins. It wasn't until she was safely in the car with the doors locked that she allowed herself to breathe. Did you get it all? She asked Jane. Every word, Jane confirmed, patting the recording equipment. Margaret's already on her way to the FBI with copies, And the journalist is standing by to publish everything if something happens to us. Good, Sarah said, looking back at the Chateau Marmont, where she had just signed her own death warrant. Because I don't think we have much time left. As they drove away, Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You should have taken the deal. Now you've ensured that Lily grows up an orphan. Congratulations on choosing pride over your daughter's future. Sarah showed the message to Jane, who immediately called Margaret to initiate their emergency protocols. The final phase of their war against David Wellington was about to begin, and Sarah knew that only one of them would survive it. The FBI field office in downtown Los Angeles buzzed with activity as Agent Rebecca Martinez reviewed the evidence that Margaret Stone's team had assembled against David Wellington. Sarah sat in a conference room, holding Lily close while federal agents processed what amounted to evidence of multiple murders, financial fraud, and domestic terrorism. Mrs. Wellington, Agent Martinez said, settling across from Sarah with a thick file. What you've brought us is the missing piece of an investigation we've been conducting for 3 years. David Wellington, or whoever he really is, has been on our radar since 2021 when we started noticing patterns in suspicious deaths connected to tech industry whistleblowers. You've been investigating him, Sarah asked, relief flooding through her. Investigating someone, Agent Martinez corrected. The problem has been that every time we get close to identifying the person responsible, he seems to disappear into a new identity. But these recordings you made, combined with the financial evidence your sister gathered, finally give us enough to move forward. Jane looked up from her laptop, where she had been working with FBI cybercrime specialists to trace David's digital footprint. Agent Martinez, we found something else. David's been using his tech company as a front for money laundering operations that involve at least 6 different criminal organizations. What kind of organizations? Agent Martinez asked. Arms dealers, human traffickers, and what appears to be a network of contract killers, Jane replied. Wellington Technologies has been processing payments for consulting services that are actually payments for assassinations. Sarah felt sick. She had shared a bed with a man who made his living facilitating murder. She had carried the child of someone who treated human life as a commodity to be bought and sold. There's more, Agent Martinez said, pulling out a series of photographs. We've identified at least 7 women over the past 15 years who fit the same pattern as David's known victims. All married wealthy, successful men who died under suspicious circumstances shortly after taking out large life insurance policies. Sarah stared at the photos. Beautiful women who looked remarkably similar to her, to Charlotte, to the other women David had murdered. They all had the same general coloring, the same facial structure, the same trusting expressions. He has a type, she whispered. More than that, Agent Martinez replied. We think he's been running a sophisticated long-term con. He identifies wealthy, successful men with complex business interests, marries them, gradually takes control of their finances, and then eliminates them while making it look like accidents or suicides. The women who help him are eliminated afterward to prevent them from becoming witnesses. But David is the wealthy, successful man in this case, Sarah pointed out. No, Jane said, looking up from her computer with a grim expression. That's what we've been getting wrong. David Wellington doesn't exist. The real David Wellington died in a car accident in Switzerland in 2002. Someone stole his identity and used it to create a completely fictional persona. Agent Martinez nodded. We've been working with Interpol to piece together his real background. What we've found is terrifying. His actual name appears to be Dmitry Volkov, and he's a former Russian intelligence operative who went rogue in the late 1990s. Russian intelligence, Sarah repeated, trying to process this information. Specifically, someone trained in deep cover operations, financial manipulation, and what the Russians call wet work, assassinations designed to look like accidents or natural causes. Agent Martinez explained. He's been using those skills in private practice for over 2 decades. The conference room door opened, and Margaret Stone entered with a woman Sarah didn't recognize. an elegant blonde in her 50s who carried herself with the bearing of someone accustomed to power. "Sarah, I'd like you to meet Victoria Blackwood," Margaret said. "Jennifer Blackwood's sister." Sarah stared at the woman, remembering Jennifer's name from the list of David's previous victims. "I'm so sorry for your loss." "Thank you," Victoria replied, settling into a chair with the grace of someone who had spent years in boardrooms and social events. "But I'm not here for sympathy. I'm here because I've been tracking the man who killed my sister for 5 years. And you've finally given us the evidence we need to stop him. You've been investigating David this whole time. David, Marcus, Alexander, Daniel. He's used so many names that I've lost count," Victoria said. "But Jennifer was my baby sister, and she didn't deserve to die because she fell in love with a monster." Victoria pulled out her own files, spreading photographs and documents across the conference table. Jennifer married him in 2018. Within 6 months, he had convinced her to change her will, take out massive life insurance policies, and give him power of attorney over her business interests. She owned a chain of luxury hotels that he systematically looted while she was pregnant with their child. "She was pregnant?" Sarah asked, instinctively holding Lily closer. "7 months," Victoria replied, her voice tight with controlled emotion. "He induced premature labor using drugs that couldn't be detected in standard toxicology tests. The baby died during delivery, and Jennifer died from complications 3 days later. The autopsy showed traces of exotic poisons that the coroner initially missed." Sarah felt tears streaming down her face as she realized how close she and Lily had come to the same fate. "He tried to do the same thing to me." "The pregnancy complications, the early labor. But you survived," Victoria said. "You and your daughter survived, which means you can help us make sure he never does this to another family." Agent Martinez spread out a map of the Los Angeles area with various locations marked in red. "Based on the evidence you provided and our ongoing surveillance, we believe Volkov is planning to eliminate all potential witnesses and flee the country within the next 24 hours. He has safe houses, escape routes, and financial resources positioned around the world." "What about Lily?" Sarah asked. "He threatened to take her with him." "We think he views your daughter as leverage," Agent Martinez explained. "If he can take her, he believes you'll never pursue him because you'll be too focused on getting her back safely. It's a strategy he's used before." Margaret leaned forward. "Which is why we need to get to him before he gets to Lily." "What are you proposing?" Sarah asked. Victoria smiled, and for the first time, it looked predatory. "We're proposing that we give him exactly what he thinks he wants. We make him believe he successfully eliminated you, which will make him confident enough to make the mistakes we need to catch him. You want me to fake my own death. We want you to disappear long enough for him to reveal his escape plan and his criminal network," Agent Martinez corrected. "Once we have that information, we can coordinate with international law enforcement to make sure there's nowhere in the world he can hide." Jane looked up from her computer with excitement. "I think I found his escape route. There's a private airfield in Riverside County that he's been using for his international travel. Flight plans filed for tomorrow night to a non-extradition country, which means we have less than 30 hours to set this trap," Margaret realized. Sarah looked around the conference room at the people who had devoted themselves to stopping David. Agent Martinez with her federal resources, Victoria with her years of patient investigation, Margaret with her network of survivors, Jane with her technical expertise. They were asking her to trust them with not just her life, but Lily's future. "What happens if something goes wrong?" Sarah asked. "What if he figures out it's a trap and disappears before you can arrest him?" "Then we spend the rest of our lives looking over our shoulders," Victoria said honestly. "But if we don't try to stop him now, other women will die. Other children will lose their mothers. Other families will be destroyed." Sarah thought about Charlotte, about Jennifer Blackwood and her baby who died, about all the victims whose names they didn't even know yet. She thought about Lily growing up in a world where monsters like David could operate with impunity, destroying lives for profit and pleasure. "What do I need to do?" she asked. Agent Martinez smiled with approval. "First, we need to make him believe you're dead. That means staging an accident that looks convincing enough to fool someone with his training and resources." What kind of accident? Car crash, Margaret said. Off one of the canyon roads in Malibu, remote enough that it would take time for emergency responders to arrive, public enough that there would be witnesses to see the car go over the edge. But I won't actually be in the car. You and Lily will be in federal protective custody, Agent Martinez confirmed. We'll use a remote-controlled vehicle and practical effects to make it look like you lost control and went off the road. David will think he's finally eliminated his biggest threat. Victoria pulled out her phone and showed Sarah a series of photos. While he's celebrating his victory, we'll be tracking his every move. He'll lead us to his safe houses, his financial accounts, his criminal contacts, and hopefully to evidence of his other victims. And then we end this, Margaret said simply. We make sure David Wellington, or Dmitry Volkov, or whatever his real name is, never hurts another family again. Sarah kissed Lily's forehead and looked around the conference room one more time. In the space of a month, she had gone from trusting housewife to federal witness in a case involving international criminals. The woman she had been would have been terrified by what they were asking her to do. But the woman she had become understood that sometimes justice required courage, sacrifice, and a willingness to risk everything for the greater good. When do we start? She asked. As Agent Martinez began outlining the details of their plan, Sarah felt something settle in her chest that she hadn't experienced since discovering David's affair. Hope, real hope, based not on naive trust, but on the strength of the people around her and the righteousness of their cause. David thought he had won by destroying her old life, but he had actually created someone far more dangerous than the woman he had married, a mother with nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. The final battle was about to begin, and for the first time since this nightmare started, Sarah believed they could actually win. The abandoned warehouse in downtown Los Angeles had been transformed into a command center that looked like something from a Hollywood thriller. Multiple screens showed surveillance feeds from cameras positioned around David's house, his office, and the private airfield where his escape plane was waiting. FBI agents coordinated with international law enforcement agencies, while technical specialists monitored communications intercepts and financial transactions. Sarah sat in a secure room watching it all unfold, Lily sleeping peacefully in her arms, both of them officially dead according to the morning news reports. Local news covered the accident perfectly, Agent Martinez reported, showing Sarah the news footage of her supposed car crash. Eyewitnesses saw a woman matching your description lose control on Mulholland Drive. The car burst into flames when it hit the bottom of the canyon, and the bodies were burned beyond recognition. David believed it, Sarah asked. Hook, line, and sinker, Victoria replied, monitoring the feeds from David's house. He called his cleanup crew within an hour of the news breaking and started moving money to his escape accounts. He thinks he's finally free to disappear. Jane looked up from her bank of computers with excitement. He's making contact with his criminal network now. We're recording everything. Names, account numbers, business arrangements, the whole organizational structure. This is going to take down dozens of people involved in his operations. On the main screen, they could see David in his home office, relaxed and confident as he made phone calls and transferred funds. He had opened a bottle of expensive champagne and was toasting what he clearly believed was his final victory. The arrogant bastard is actually celebrating, Margaret said with disgust. Let him, Agent Martinez replied. Every minute he spends gloating is another minute we have to gather evidence and coordinate with our international partners. Sarah watched her husband, former husband, she corrected herself, and tried to reconcile this cold, calculating killer with the man she had loved for 20 years. Had there ever been a real David, or had it all been an elaborate performance by a trained intelligence operative, Mrs. Wellington? Agent Martinez said, sitting down beside her. I want you to know that what you've done today has probably saved dozens of lives. The intelligence we're gathering will help us shut down criminal networks in 6 different countries. What happens next? Sarah asked. We wait for him to make his move toward the airfield, Agent Martinez explained. Once he's committed to his escape route, we'll have teams in position to arrest him and his associates simultaneously. Victoria smiled grimly as she watched David through the surveillance cameras. He has no idea that Jennifer's sister has been coordinating with law enforcement for 5 years, building a case that will ensure he never sees freedom again. What about all his victims? Sarah asked. The families who never got justice. They'll finally have it, Victoria promised. David kept detailed records of his crimes, probably as insurance against his criminal partners. When we seize his computers and safe houses, we'll have evidence of every murder, every fraud, every life he destroyed. As they watched, David received a phone call that changed his entire demeanor. His relaxed confidence evaporated, replaced by urgent, worried activity. Something's wrong, Jane observed, adjusting the audio equipment to pick up his conversation. What do you mean the account is frozen? David was saying into his phone. That's impossible. I moved that money yesterday. Agent Martinez smiled with satisfaction. Treasury Department froze his offshore accounts 20 minutes ago. He's about to discover that his escape fund has disappeared. David's voice rose as he realized the scope of his problem. Check the Swiss accounts. Check the Cayman accounts. Check everything, all frozen, Jane reported. He's got maybe $50,000 in immediate cash access, which isn't enough to disappear internationally with the lifestyle he's accustomed to. He's going to panic, Victoria predicted. And when men like David panic, they make mistakes. Sure enough, David was now moving frantically around his office, pulling files from safes and burning documents in his fireplace. But he was also making phone calls that the FBI was recording, revealing details about criminal partnerships and hidden assets that would never have come to light otherwise. Is he still planning to run? Sarah asked. He doesn't have a choice, Agent Martinez replied. He thinks you're dead, but he knows Charlotte disappeared with evidence of his crimes. He has to assume that information will surface eventually, which means staying in the country is suicide. Margaret pointed to another screen showing activity at the private airfield. Looks like his plane is being prepped for departure. 2 hours until his flight window opens. And that's when we take him down, Agent Martinez confirmed. As they watched David's increasing desperation, Sarah found herself feeling an emotion she hadn't expected. Pity. This man had destroyed so many lives, caused so much pain and suffering, yet in the end he was just another criminal trapped by his own greed and arrogance. I almost feel sorry for him, she said quietly. Victoria's expression hardened. Save your sympathy for his victims. David made choices every day for decades. He chose to kill innocent women. He chose to steal their children's futures. He chose to build his wealth on other people's suffering. Sarah nodded, understanding that Victoria's anger came from years of grief and frustration. You're right. I keep trying to find some trace of the man I thought I married. That man never existed, Victoria said gently. He was a character created by a professional liar. The real person was always this monster you're seeing now. Lily stirred in Sarah's arms, making small baby sounds that reminded everyone in the command center what they were really fighting for. The next generation. The innocent children who deserved to grow up in a world where predators like David couldn't operate with impunity. Mrs. Wellington, Agent Martinez said, checking her watch. It's time for the final phase of our operation. David will be leaving for the airfield within the hour, and we need you to make one last phone call. What kind of call? From beyond the grave, Margaret said with a cold smile. We want him to know that his celebration was premature, that his victims aren't as easy to eliminate as he thought. Sarah looked down at Lily, sleeping peacefully despite the chaos surrounding them. In a few hours, this would all be over. David would be in custody, his criminal network would be dismantled, and she and her daughter would finally be safe. But first, she had to deliver the final blow to the man who had tried to destroy them. Give me the phone, Sarah said, her voice steady and determined. It's time to end this. As Agent Martinez handed her the secure phone, Sarah thought about all the women who hadn't survived their encounters with David. Jennifer and her baby, Charlotte who had died trying to make amends, the nameless victims whose stories they were only beginning to uncover. This call wasn't just about justice for her and Lily. It was about justice for all of them. David answered on the first ring, his voice tense with the stress of his deteriorating situation. "Hello, David," Sarah said, her voice carrying across the command center speakers. "Did you miss me?" The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. When David finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. "That's impossible. You're dead. I saw the news reports." "Death was always your specialty, not mine," Sarah replied. "Did you really think it would be that easy to get rid of me?" "Sarah, listen to me very carefully," David said, his voice taking on that manipulative tone she knew so well. "I don't know what game you think you're playing, but you need to stop this now. You have no idea how dangerous this situation has become." "Dangerous for who?" Sarah asked. "For you, good. You should be scared. David, you should be terrified, because everything is falling apart, isn't it? Your money is gone, your escape routes are compromised, and all your crimes are about to become public knowledge." David's breathing became audible over the phone. "What do you want, justice?" Sarah said simply. "For me, for Lily, for Charlotte, for Jennifer Blackwood, for all the women whose lives you destroyed for money and power." "You don't understand what you're dealing with," David said desperately. "The people I work with, the organizations involved, they won't just kill you, Sarah. They'll make you suffer first. They'll hurt Lily. The only person who's going to suffer is you," Sarah replied. "And the only person who hurt children was you, when you killed Jennifer's baby and tried to kill mine." "Sarah, please," David said, and for the first time, he sounded genuinely frightened. "We can work something out. I have money, resources, connections. I can make this worth your while." "The only thing that would be worth my while is watching you spend the rest of your life in prison," Sarah said, "which is exactly what's about to happen." She could hear David moving around frantically, probably grabbing whatever cash and documents he could carry. "This isn't over," he said, his voice hardening with renewed determination. "I've survived worse than you can imagine, and I'll survive this too. And when I do, I'm coming for you and that baby." "No," Sarah said quietly, "you won't. Because this time, you're not just dealing with an isolated woman with no resources. This time, you're dealing with the FBI, Interpol, and about a dozen other law enforcement agencies who are very interested in your activities." The line went dead as David hung up, but the damage was done. Agent Martinez was already coordinating with the teams positioned around the airfield, and surveillance cameras showed David loading a bag into his car with desperate urgency. "He's running," Victoria observed with satisfaction. "Right into our trap." Sarah handed the phone back to Agent Martinez and settled Lily more comfortably in her arms. In less than an hour, the man who had terrorized so many families would be in federal custody, facing charges that would ensure he never hurt anyone again. "How do you feel?" Margaret asked. Sarah considered the question carefully. She felt exhausted, relieved, angry, sad, and hopeful all at the same time, but mostly she felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Safe. "I feel like we won," she said finally. As they watched David's car speed toward the airfield and his waiting arrest, Sarah allowed herself to imagine the future that was now possible. Lily would grow up knowing that her mother had fought for justice, that sometimes good people could win against impossible odds. That family meant protecting each other no matter what the cost. The nightmare was almost over. The reckoning had finally come. 6 months after David Wellington's arrest, Sarah stood in the kitchen of her new home in Napa Valley, watching the sunrise paint the vineyard in shades of gold and purple. Lily sat in her high chair, babbling contentedly while Sarah prepared their breakfast. The peaceful morning routine felt like a miracle after everything they had survived. The house was everything Sarah had dreamed of during those dark months of fighting for their freedom. A sprawling farmhouse with panoramic views of rolling hills covered in grapevines. Far enough from Los Angeles to feel safe, but close enough to stay connected to the friends who had helped save their lives. She had bought it with part of the settlement money from David's seized assets, money that represented justice for all his victims. Good morning, beautiful girl, Sarah said to Lily, who was now 8 months old and developing her own distinct personality. She had David's blue eyes but Sarah's stubborn chin, and she seemed determined to crawl everywhere, despite Sarah's attempts to baby-proof their new home. The kitchen island was covered with papers, not legal documents this time, but exciting correspondence about Sarah's new ventures. Her memoir, From Betrayal to Billions, A Mother's Fight for Justice, had topped bestseller lists for 3 months running. Publishers were competing for the rights to her follow-up book, and producers were interested in turning her story into a limited series. More importantly, the Sarah Wellington Foundation for Financially Abused Women was now helping hundreds of women escape situations similar to what she had endured. The foundation provided legal assistance, emergency housing, financial counseling, and emotional support to women whose wealthy partners used money as a weapon of control. Sarah's phone rang, interrupting her peaceful morning. The caller ID showed Dr. James Mitchell, the pediatric surgeon she had been dating for the past 3 months. He was everything David had never been: honest, gentle, genuinely interested in her thoughts and feelings, and completely devoted to Lily. "Good morning," she answered, unable to keep the smile out of her voice. "Good morning to you, too," James replied, his warm voice carrying the slight southern accent that she found inexplicably charming. "Are you ready for our big day?" Sarah looked down at her outfit, a flowing sundress that felt both elegant and comfortable, perfect for what James had mysteriously described as a special picnic overlooking the vineyard. "I think so, though I'm still not sure what this surprise is all about." "Trust me," James said, and the word that had once triggered such fear and betrayal now made her feel warm and secure. "Just meet me at Sunset Point with Lily. I promise you won't be disappointed." After hanging up, Sarah spent the day working on foundation business and playing with Lily, who had recently learned to clap her hands and seemed to think it was the most amazing skill anyone had ever developed. The baby's joy and simple pleasures reminded Sarah daily of what really mattered in life. At 5 o'clock, Sarah loaded Lily into her car seat and drove through the vineyard to the highest point on her property, where a small gazebo overlooked the entire Napa Valley. The view never failed to take her breath away, endless rows of grapevines stretching toward mountains purple with approaching dusk. The perfect California landscape that represented her new beginning. James was already there, standing beside a beautifully arranged picnic spread with champagne, strawberries, and what appeared to be Sarah's favorite foods from their previous dates. He looked handsome in khakis and a blue button-down shirt that brought out his eyes. But more importantly, he looked nervous in a way that made Sarah's heart skip. "This is beautiful," Sarah said, settling Lily on a blanket where she could safely explore while staying close. "What's the occasion?" "The occasion," James said, dropping to one knee in front of her, "is that I love you, Sarah Wellington. I love your strength, your compassion, your intelligence, and your incredible ability to create beauty and hope from the worst circumstances. I love the way you laugh at my terrible medical jokes and the way you sing to Lily when you think no one is listening." Sarah's hands flew to her mouth as James pulled out a ring box, the diamond catching the golden light of the setting sun. "I know we haven't been together very long," James continued, "but I also know that some connections transcend time. You've shown me what real love looks like, not the manipulative, controlling version that hurt you before, but the kind that makes people better versions of themselves. Will you marry me? Sarah, will you let me spend the rest of my life loving you and helping you raise this amazing little girl?" Sarah felt tears streaming down her face, but they were happy tears this time, tears of joy, relief, and hope for a future she had never dared to imagine. She looked at Lily, who was clapping her hands as if she approved of the proposal, then back at James's earnest, loving face. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, of course, yes." James slipped the ring onto her finger with hands that shook slightly, then pulled her into a kiss that tasted like promises and new beginnings. When they broke apart, Lily was still clapping, as if celebrating her mother's happiness. "There's something else," James said. settling beside Sarah on the blanket. I've been offered a position heading the pediatric surgery department at UCSF. It's a huge opportunity, but it would mean moving to San Francisco. I wanted to talk to you about it before I gave them an answer. Sarah considered this, looking out over the vineyard that had become her sanctuary. What do you think about commuting? This place has become so important to me, to my healing process, and the foundation is based here now. I think we can make anything work as long as we're together, James replied, kissing her forehead. We'll figure out the logistics. The important thing is that we're building something real together. As they shared dinner watching the sunset, Sarah felt more content than she had ever been. The trauma of David's betrayal would always be part of her story, but it no longer defined her future. She was a survivor, a mother, a successful author and philanthropist. And now she was a woman in love again with someone who deserved her trust. Her phone buzzed with a text from Margaret Stone. Saw the news about David's sentencing. Life without parole, plus charges filed in 3 other countries. Justice served. How are you celebrating? Sarah smiled and typed back, getting engaged, we'll call you tomorrow with details. Margaret's response was immediate. About time, James is perfect for you. Enjoy every moment of happiness. You've earned it. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Sarah held Lily while James cleaned up their picnic. This was the life she had dreamed of during those dark months of fighting for their freedom. Peaceful, loving, filled with hope for the future. Lily had started walking the week before, taking unsteady steps between the furniture with the determined concentration of someone conquering new territory. Watching her daughter's fearless exploration of the world reminded Sarah daily that courage was often just the decision to keep moving forward despite uncertainty. I have one more surprise, James said, returning from loading the picnic supplies into his car. My sister is flying in next weekend to meet you and Lily. She's been dying to meet the woman who stole her big brother's heart. I'd love to meet her, Sarah replied, shifting Lily to her other hip. What's she like? Brilliant, funny, protective of the people she loves, and completely unimpressed by my medical degree, James said with a grin. You two are going to get along perfectly. As they walked back toward the house, Lily fell asleep against Sarah's shoulder, exhausted by the excitement of the evening. Sarah looked at her engagement ring sparkling in the porch light and felt overwhelmed by gratitude for the second chance at happiness she had never expected to receive. Inside the house, James helped put Lily to bed while Sarah changed into more comfortable clothes. The domestic routine felt natural and right, as if they had been a family for years rather than months. Sarah, James said as they settled on the couch with glasses of wine, I want you to know that I understand this isn't just about us. When I marry you, I'm also committing to being Lily's father in every way that matters. I don't take that responsibility lightly. I know you don't, Sarah replied, curling up against his side. That's one of the many reasons I love you. They spent the evening planning their future together, a small wedding ceremony in the vineyard, combining their households, James adopting Lily legally, maybe having more children together someday. The conversation flowed easily, filled with laughter and dreams and the comfortable intimacy of two people who had found their perfect match. It wasn't until Sarah was getting ready for bed that she noticed the envelope that had been slipped under her front door. There was no return address, no postmark, just her name written in block letters across expensive paper. Inside was a single photograph that made her blood run cold. It showed Charlotte Hayes standing in what appeared to be a prison courtyard, very much alive despite David's claims that she had died in an accident. But that wasn't the most terrifying part of the image. Charlotte was holding a current newspaper with a clearly visible date from just 3 days ago. She was smiling at the camera, and someone had written across the bottom of the photo in red ink, "Did you really think it would be that easy? The real game begins now. See you soon. Your best friend forever." Sarah's hands shook as she read the message again and again, trying to process what it meant. Charlotte was alive. Charlotte was free. And Charlotte was still playing whatever twisted game she and David had been orchestrating from the beginning. The phone rang, startling Sarah so badly that she dropped the photograph. The caller ID showed an unknown number, but somehow she knew who it would be before she answered. "Hello, Sarah." Charlotte's voice was exactly as Sarah remembered, warm, friendly, completely at odds with the menace of her message. "Did you get my little surprise?" "Charlotte," Sarah whispered, sinking onto her bed as her legs gave out. "You're supposed to be dead." "Death was always more David's specialty than mine," Charlotte replied, echoing the words Sarah had once used against David. "I'm much better at the long game, at planning and patience, and making sure my enemies never see me coming." "What do you want?" "What I've always wanted," Charlotte said. "Everything you have. Your money, your success, your beautiful new life, your precious daughter." David was always too direct, too violent. He thought fear and intimidation were the best weapons. "But I know you better than he ever did. Sarah, I know that the most effective way to destroy you is to make you destroy yourself." Sarah looked toward the nursery where Lily was sleeping peacefully, unaware that their world was about to be turned upside down again. "If you come near my daughter—" "Oh, I'm not going to hurt Lily," Charlotte interrupted. "I'm going to love her and care for her and raise her as my own after you're gone. She'll never even remember you." "Sarah." Just like she would never have remembered David if things had gone according to the original plan. "What original plan?" Charlotte laughed, and the sound was like broken glass. "You poor, naive woman. Did you really think you figured everything out? David was never the mastermind. Sarah, he was just another tool, another weapon in a much larger game. I've been planning your destruction since the day we met, building your trust so I could use it against you when the time was right." Sarah felt the familiar sensation of her world shifting beneath her feet, but this time she fought against the panic. She had survived David's betrayal and emerged stronger. She would survive this too. "Why?" she asked. "Because you had everything I wanted and you didn't deserve any of it," Charlotte replied with venom that had been hidden for over a decade. "Rich husband, successful business, beautiful homes, respect in our industry. You got all of that by accident, just by being in the right place at the right time. I had to work for everything, fight for every opportunity, claw my way up from nothing, and you just floated through life expecting everything to be handed to you." "That's not true," Sarah protested. "Isn't it? You never even questioned why I wanted to be your partner, why I was so eager to help you build your business. You just assumed I was your friend because I was nice to you. You never suspected that I was systematically stealing your clients, your designs, your husband, your entire life." Sarah closed her eyes, trying to process the magnitude of Charlotte's deception. "How long have you been planning this?" "Since college," and Charlotte admitted. "I've been studying you, learning your weaknesses, positioning myself to take everything you care about. David was just the first phase. The real plan was always much more ambitious." "What's the real plan?" "You'll find out soon enough," Charlotte said. "But here's a preview, that foundation you're so proud of. I've been gathering information about every woman you've helped, every vulnerable person who trusts you. Your memoir, I have evidence that will prove it's filled with lies and fabrications. Your new boyfriend, I know things about his past that will destroy his career and his relationship with you." Sarah felt sick. James has nothing to do with this. James Mitchell, pediatric surgeon, divorced, 2 malpractice settlements that were quietly sealed, a drinking problem that cost him his last position, Charlotte recited as if reading from a file. "Oh, and a gambling addiction that has him in debt to some very dangerous people. Did he mention any of that during your romantic courtship?" "You're lying." "Am I ask him about the patient who died during surgery while he was intoxicated? Ask him about the money he owes to bookmakers in Las Vegas. Ask him why he really moved to California and why he was so eager to attach himself to a wealthy woman with a tragic story that would rehabilitate his reputation." Sarah's engagement ring suddenly felt heavy on her finger. "Even if any of that were true, it doesn't change anything between us." "Doesn't it? How well do you really know James Mitchell?" "Sarah, how do you know he's not just another David, another predator who saw an opportunity to exploit a vulnerable woman. The line went dead, leaving Sarah staring at her phone in the darkness of her bedroom. Outside, the vineyard that had represented her new beginning now felt exposed and vulnerable. The security system that had made her feel safe seemed inadequate against an enemy who had been planning her destruction for over a decade. Sarah walked to the nursery and looked down at Lily, sleeping peacefully in her crib. Her daughter's face was perfect in the soft glow of the nightlight, completely trusting that her mother would keep her safe from all the monsters in the world. But what if the monsters were already inside their home? Sarah picked up her phone to call James, then stopped. Charlotte's words echoed in her mind, planting seeds of doubt that she hated herself for entertaining. How well did she really know the man she had just agreed to marry? Was it possible that her judgment was still compromised by everything she had endured with David, instead of calling James? Sarah called Margaret Stone. "Sarah, it's late. Is everything okay?" "Charlotte is alive," Sarah said without preamble. "She contacted me tonight. She's been planning this whole thing since college, and she says David was just the first phase of a larger plan to destroy my life." Margaret was quiet for a long moment. "Where are you now?" "At home with Lily." Margaret, she knew things about James, personal things about his past. How would she know details about his previous career unless she's been investigating everyone close to me? "Pack a bag," Margaret said immediately. "Get Lily and get out of there now. Come to my place in the city, and we'll figure out our next move from there." "What about James? He proposed tonight, and now I don't know what to believe about him." "We'll investigate James thoroughly, but right now the priority is keeping you and Lily safe. If Charlotte has been planning this for as long as she claims, then she's had years to position assets and allies. You can't trust anyone until we know the full scope of what we're dealing with." Sarah looked around the bedroom that had felt like a sanctuary just hours ago. The house that had represented her new beginning now felt like a trap, and the peaceful life she had been building felt like another elaborate illusion designed to make her vulnerable. As she packed essentials for herself and Lily, Sarah couldn't help but think about the pattern of her life: trust, betrayal, discovery, escape, rebuild, repeat. Was she destined to live in this cycle forever, always looking over her shoulder, always waiting for the next attack? Lily stirred as Sarah lifted her from the crib, but didn't wake completely. As Sarah carried her daughter to the car, she made the same promise she had made 6 months ago in the hospital. She would protect Lily no matter what it cost, no matter how many times she had to start over. But this time, she wasn't going to wait for Charlotte to make the first move. She was going to find her former best friend and end this once and for all. The war wasn't over. It had just entered a new phase, one that would require Sarah to become someone even more dangerous than the woman who had survived David's betrayal. As she drove through the dark Napa Valley toward Margaret's house in San Francisco, Sarah caught sight of headlights in her rearview mirror, a car that had been following her since she left the vineyard, maintaining the same distance no matter how she adjusted her speed. Charlotte wasn't just alive. She was already making her next move. Sarah pressed harder on the accelerator and reached for her phone to call Margaret with an update that would change everything. She's not just back. She's already here. The nightmare that Sarah thought had ended with David's arrest was just beginning, but this time, she wouldn't be caught off guard. This time, she would be ready for war. As Lily slept peacefully in her car seat, unaware that their perfect new life was already under attack, Sarah made a decision that would define the next chapter of their story. She wasn't running away this time. She was running toward the fight that would finally end Charlotte's twisted game forever. The headlights followed her through the darkness, and Sarah smiled grimly as she planned her counterattack. Charlotte thought she knew Sarah's weaknesses, thought she could manipulate her with fear and doubt. Charlotte was about to learn that the woman she had tried to destroy was now someone much more dangerous than she had ever imagined. The real war was just beginning.